Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Guest EdTech Virtual Summit Dubai. Thank you for joining us. We are pleased to introduce you to Kevin Fullbrook, Deputy Director of Al-Bayan Bilingual School in Kuwait, who will be presenting on ensuring well-being for all when working and learning remotely. We hope that you enjoy this session, and over to you, Kevin.
Great, thanks, Danny. Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone who's joining us today. And look, I'm really excited to talk about this topic today, something that I'm very passionate about and is really important for many of us at the moment. It has been for many months as we think about and consider, well-being for everyone in our communities when we're working and learning remotely. And this is some of the things that we'll talk about today. Not only apply to working and learning remotely, they as equally apply to challenges associated with blended or hybrid learning, or even as we transition back to on-campus learning. Well-being and approaches to well-being are as equally important in any of those scenarios. So thank you for joining us. My name is Kevin Fullbrook. I'm the Deputy Director at Al-Bayan Bilingual School in Kuwait. Now, just to give you a little context of the situation in Kuwait that we find ourselves as a school, of course, facing many challenges as many communities are around the world. So we have been, our students have been learning virtually from home, online, since the 1st of March. All schools across Kuwait. And we continue to do so at this time and for some time to come, at least at this stage until perhaps December or January, and then waiting on the advice and guidance from the relative ministries and authorities here in Kuwait. So we're busy looking after our students now, but also, as many of us are doing, planning for different scenarios for the future, and considering how rapidly things change at this time is a very interesting prospect. So what we're not going to be talking about today is a whole massive amount of tips, strategies, and programs to improve well-being in your community. Now, there's plenty of stuff out there. A quick Google search will give you plenty of examples and case studies and programs and tips and ideas right around the world of people doing some really great things. And, as is important with anything that you choose to do or examine or look at for your school community, is about being focused and putting your energy and effort into a narrow range of things, but making sure you do them really well. Not trying to do everything, but choosing a narrow range of things and doing them really well. So that's what we'll be looking at, discussing and talking about today, focused on really, well-being comes back to a big part, a sense of community, collaboration, and connection, and how those things are intertwined with well-being, and of course, different aspects of well-being as well, mental and physical and so forth. So what I hope to do is talk a little bit about why is this important. Now, some of these questions here might sound like rhetorical questions, or the answers may sound evident, but it's worthwhile exploring them a little bit deeper to ensure that the way you go about addressing them is addressing them in the right way. So we're talking about, why is this important to begin with? How do I know if this is an issue for my community? And by community, we're talking about, it might be your class, your family, your grade level, your school, your broader school community in the local area you're in. Talking about how can we enhance well-being in our community. And with that, looking at some specific examples, resources, and strategies that we found here at our school that have worked for us. Doesn't mean they work for everyone, doesn't mean they are shining lights and that we've got everything right. We certainly haven't. And it's an evolving thing, and it's something that we're constantly examining, evolving, and adapting over time so that we can best meet the needs of our students, our staff, and our community. So I think it helps to first begin by examining, well, what exactly is well-being? So the Oxford Dictionary says it's a state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. Now, look, I would argue at the moment, during the times at the moment, who would really describe themselves as having a high sense of well-being, a high state of well-being? Are they comfortable, healthy, or happy? Perhaps they're different elements of one or two or three of those things. But I think what we're finding is that there's a great sense of being uncomfortable, which comes from not knowing what the future holds. And with that comes a sense of anxiety for some people, as they grapple with unknown situations. What's happening tomorrow, next week, next month, or next year? The level of certainty that we might have had in the past is simply not there anymore. And that can affect people's state of well-being. But I think it's useful to examine well-being from a much broader sense. So it's not simply just the absence of disease or disorder or anxiety or something else, but rather it's a state in which an individual can thrive. So when we examine well-being from, I guess, through that lens, we're looking at something that can always be improved upon. You know, if you have a disease or a condition or something, you would go to the doctor, go to the hospital, they'd prescribe some medication, you'd take that, hopefully then it would be resolved, you'd be fixed. End of story. But well-being doesn't work in that way. It's not something that's ever fixed or done. It's always something that can be improved, worked upon, and developed further. And that's really the basis for our work and really those people around the world that are doing such really great things around well-being. Is it's something that people continually work on. It's not something that's ever fixed or solved or you can tick off as done. And that's the lens that we want to look through well-being in. So why is this important for staff? So collaboration and connection can be a challenge when you're juggling commitments at home, especially if you have young children who are also learning from home. So in the cases of lockdown, so Kuwait had an extended period of lockdown on top of schools being shut, but people not allowed to leave their homes for extended periods of time, for some, many months. So when your children, so there's my two young ones there, you know, when you ask them to go get ready for school, a virtual school, and they come back like this, it really sets a tone for the day. When you've got a busy day ahead supporting your staff and your school community, supporting your kids at home when they're learning, and you know, I'll let you imagine what this day ended up turning out like. I'm sure they had fun though, so that's the main thing. It's also important to think about, you know, as we are an international school, I have many single teachers away from their friends and family. So there's already a big disconnect for many teachers. Support frameworks and mechanisms that if they were in their home country would exist. They might live down the road from their parents or cousins or brother and sister, would be living in the same suburb or something like that. They're friends. And with that distance comes some real challenges as people find themselves removed from those support structures that they perhaps for the first time that they may have had in place for many, many years. Our school, BBS, had some really difficult times during the most challenging parts of the pandemic when unfortunately, we had a number of staff members who passed away. Really, really challenging times. And, you know, we'll talk a little bit later about things that you can do to ensure that you're checking in with your staff. How do you know they're okay? You're not seeing them around the school. You're not bumping into them in the hallways or the corridors or ducking into their lesson. Everyone in that situation is working from home. How can we make sure that everyone is safe and well? And then also, of course, we expect our teachers, you know, to take on so much during times of crisis. Even when times are are well. Our teachers seem to take on so many different roles, and that just increases and has increased over the years. But who's looking after them? And when things get really challenging, what does that look like? Why is this important for our students? So really, well-being, for a big part of the well-being, comes from the social aspect of school, and that we spoke about before, the connection and the collaboration that exists with on-campus learning is really missing during virtual learning, or even to a greatly reduced extent in blended or hybrid learning. That really social learning, that play-based interactions with their peers, that's not structured, that's not formal, things in the playground, in the hallway, making mistakes, getting into arguments, resolving arguments with their peers. That's something that's really has been missing for some time, which feeds into communication skills, and particularly nonverbal communication. An example is this recorded presentation, virtually as well. You miss a whole lot from the communication side of things when you put stuff on a screen. We're all doing the best we can, but it's not ideal. And there's a big missing piece of the puzzle there for our students, particularly our younger students in their formative years, that are missing out on developing those really key skills, those soft skills that are going to serve them so well later in life. So when we examine well-being, there needs to be an important consideration. As well as for those of you joining us from the Middle East, I know Kuwait, some cultures learn more verbally and socially than others. Kuwait is a very verbal and social culture that our students learn by talking and speaking things through, and discussion and debate and argument is a really important part of the learning process. And that is really challenging online to do, and to find ways that our students can learn effectively, drawing on the strengths of their culture. So that's something that's examined, which feeds in again to well-being. You can't separate or tease these things out. They're all intertwined, and all as equally as important. So how do I know if this is an issue? How do I know if well-being is something that needs more attention in my school community, in my class, etc.? Well, one thing is simply ask. There are many really great surveys out there, informal, couple of questions. How are you feeling today? How did today go for you? How can I best support you today or next week? What is something I can do to next week to help you with X, Y, or Z? It's fairly straightforward. You ask. If you're not sure, you need to be wary about making assumptions. It doesn't mean you need lots of quantitative data either, but a simple survey, a simple discussion, going around talking to people, asking people is really one really powerful way to find out and get a first-hand account from people. And you'd be surprised, those people who don't reach out would normally not be proactive and reach out. The things, both staff and students, how they respond if you ask in the right ways. So some of the things we'll talk about briefly around how we can enhance well-being. One way is through relationship mapping. There's some really great resources out there. Looking at things, framing things around a circle of concern, which feeds into things like empathy and compassion. And then some practical things that many schools do that to try and bring in the wellbeing socialization aspect and additional support structures is around counsellor corners, virtual lunchtimes, parent virtual coffees or meeting sessions, and virtual physical challenges as well. I've seen so many great things out there that schools are doing, and hopefully we'll have time that can share a little bit about what we are doing here at BBS in Kuwait. So relationship mapping essentially is basically identifying which students have positive existing relationships with at least one adult in the school, and then identifying students who don't and who we might identify as at risk. So it's basically like a supersized buddy system where you are matching up or pairing up adults and students to make sure that everyone in the school has at least one meaningful connection with someone else in the school. So a student with a teacher or an administrator or a counselor or whoever that might be. So down in the bottom corner there, you can see there's a lot of great work from Glenn Manning out of Making Caring Common, an initiative out of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And they very generously provide resources and tools like a snapshot of the spreadsheet here that you can use and adapt and implement straight away in your setting. So for example, this spreadsheet is literally mapping it out on a spreadsheet, having your students, identifying in the yellow column there, staff who have a positive relationship, they would put an X if they have a positive relationship with that student. If a staff member feels that that child is at risk, maybe they're very quiet, maybe they're disconnected, there is another level of concern there, then they would put an X there. And then you can go through a process of identifying on the very right-hand column a faculty match. And then from there, that being the first step, then looks like how would you then create those connections? So what are you going to do with that relationship? How are you going to check in with that child, keep an eye on their well-being and making sure they're in a position to do as well as they can in the current situation? Now, it doesn't only work for students. It's, as I would argue, as equally important for staff. It's easy for staff, particularly during these times. Even at the moment, we are back on campus as staff. Our students are still at home, but we are obviously social distancing, no in-person meetings. So you could go a whole day without not really seeing anyone, and it can be almost just as isolating. So this is something that's really, really important in terms of, does everyone across your staff have someone have a meaningful connection with another member of staff? So how do you know if they're okay? And that can look like a whole range of different things. You can go through on the previous slide a very specific relationship mapping strategy from an administrator perspective, or as a head of department, or as a whole staff process. And then what that looks like after that is dependent on your context and what you want to achieve. So whether that is a buddy system, a check-in system, like WhatsApp or some other technology platform that you might use already from a professional side. It might be about visits if your circumstances allow it. So myself and some others were very fortunate during the initial stages of lockdown, when we were allowed to a period of time to go out. Then we went and we visited each staff member in person at their apartment and brought them a fruit basket and some different things just to check on them. Hopefully try and brighten their day and just check in and say, how are you going? Is there anything else we can do? And just little things like that really do go a long way. Also, a big part of that during those sorts of times is staff feeling comfortable about what to do if a particular scenario happens. So particularly if they're in a country where they don't speak the language, who do I contact if I get sick? Who do I contact if I need medication or I need groceries, or all of those everyday things that under certain circumstances might prove a lot more difficult for people to do, particularly if they are under high levels of stress or anxiety, and their decision making is not at its best. How can we support people in that way? Another aspect of well-being, and this is taken, you can see in the bottom right-hand corner from an excellent website, Habits for Wellbeing. There's many things and adaptations of this. to how do we increase people's circle of concern, which is essentially talking about increasing our empathy and compassion for others to make sure that we are considering the well-being of other people. So on the very left-hand side there, you can see a simple circle, a circle of concern, and then outside of that is no concern. So in all of our lives, we have, I guess, a circle of concern of things that we are worried about, things that we're concerned about, whether that's our family, our finances, or whatever that might be. And then we have things outside of that we're not really concerned about. Then if we go to the middle diagram there, within that circle of concern, we can think about it in terms of what things are we concerned about that we actually have some sort of influence over. Perhaps we don't have full control, but we have some sort of influence. So for example, in my circle of concern, I am concerned about climate change and the environment and sustainability. Now, while I don't have complete control over that, I do have, that is within my circle of influence. I do have, through my behaviors, I can recycle, I can be a good role model for others, I can encourage my children, encourage my students, and we can have an impact in that way. So within my circle of influence, I have some agency there. The very right-hand side, within that circle of influence, you have things that you can actually control. Things like, while I can't control my health, it's certainly something I'm concerned about. So what I can control, though, is what I eat and how much I exercise and how much sleep I get. All of those types of things. How I manage my day for the most part, whether I make my bed in the morning, all of those things are within my control. Now, that can be a really useful tool to help people cope with levels of anxiety or reframe things in their mind about, yes, we might be concerned about certain things and people may feel like it's so much out of our control, which is true to an extent, but there's also an awful lot that's within our control. And sometimes a focus on that can be really powerful for people when they realize all those things that they can control and influence. Now, where the challenge is under times of stress or anxiety or challenge or difficulty, our circle of concern sometimes shrinks down. So we go to, under pressure, we are more concerned about ourselves and our own safety, our own ability to function. Sometimes we just perhaps focus just on our family. So our entire circle of concern is looking after your family on a day-to-day basis. Now, how does this relate to well-being? And you're being really long-winded, and I agree with you. Part of it is about getting our students and our staff to see that how can we expand that circle of concern. So rather just making sure that we're okay, how can I make sure my family is okay? How can I make sure my classmates are okay? Sort of expanding this notion of a circle of concern. How can I be concerned about my classmates or my school community, whatever it might be. And that's going to encourage greater levels of empathy and compassion for people if that circle of concern increases. So some ways to do that and to increase that collaboration and connection amongst people is through counsellor corners, having an open time for students to pop in virtually and speak with their counsellors in an informal, unstructured way, and providing an intentional opportunity for people to do that, whether that be students or staff. Having a virtual lunchtime. So as we mentioned before, an important aspect is that social learning and play. And as students are learning from home, they're not getting that. They might be getting that from their brother or sister, whoever is in their household. But apart from that, it can be really challenging. So how do you as a school provide those unstructured times for your students to connect and just informally chat and have a conversation and do all those things they normally would at school, make those connections with their friends that they sometimes haven't seen for a long time. Having the same opportunities for parents, whether that's virtual coffee mornings, other like town hall style meetings. And it's really interesting how those meetings evolve. We started those as an opportunity to gather feedback, to, communicate with our parents and let them know the things we were doing and why we were doing them, encouraging them to ask questions and to offer feedback. And after a while, the number of parents attending those remained the same, but the number of questions reduced a lot. So we anticipated that, well, we wouldn't get as many parents joining these sessions over time. But that just wasn't true. The numbers at those sessions were pretty consistent. And, I asked one of the parents, they said, well, look, we haven't seen you for a long time. We just want to connect and we just want to hear from you. We want to hear what's happening in the school. We want to hear from other parents and see other parents because we miss that social aspect of the school. They've been sort of, in some contexts, the center of the community, or at very least an important part of that community. So there was a lot of unintended consequences, positive ones, through having things like that. Of course, there's a whole range of, we think about physical well-being as well, a whole range of physical challenges and different things that you can do. I've seen some wonderful things from the region and globally as well, that people set up for their staff or students to challenge themselves to be physically healthy. So as we talk about compassion and empathy, and which leads into caring and well-being, what are some essential elements for schools? And this again is from this excellent resource from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, and Making Caring Common. So essential elements for schools that need to be in place is modeling empathy. You need to show people what it looks like through your actions. But that's not enough, of course. You need to teach what it is and why it matters. It's really important to, a lot of the times we make assumptions that students or others will know what we mean or know what to do. But how can we expect that if we don't explicitly teach them around why this is important, why it matters, and what it actually is? Practicing it. Of course, you have to do it all the time. It can't just be tokenism. It can't just be lip service. It has to be something that is ongoing. You need to set clear ethical expectations of what this means, what is okay and what is not okay. And of course, making school culture and climate a priority that encompasses well-being as a big part of that is really important. Now, there's some resources there. We're almost out of time. So there's some resources there that certainly I would recommend, and some organizations that do some great work, like I Can Help and Nata Kalam as well, who through different means, so I Can Help is around peer-to-peer digital wellness and safety support, so from students to students. Some wonderful resources and great work that they're doing in that space. Nata Kalam, the work they're doing about their work with refugees and displaced people and connecting them with work around translation, and they're doing some really fantastic work in schools and connecting people in those ways, which is fantastic for the people aligned with their organization, and fantastic for schools and students. So thank you so much again for joining us today. They're my contact details. I know it says questions there. Please don't yell anything at the screen as a recorded session. There's facilities there to put some Q&A later on. And I believe I can jump in there and answer any questions that you might have during the course of the virtual summit. But feel free to reach out directly. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kevin. That was very informative. The well-being of staff, students, and the school community in general is such an important topic that should always be looked into, especially at this time. So thank you so much for the enjoyable presentation. If anyone from the audience has any questions pertaining to the session, as Kevin said, you can contact him directly through the contact details showing on the slide in front of you, or through the networking system on the virtual event platform. We'd also love to hear from you, so feel free to share your thoughts and comments by sending us an email to marketing@guesteducation.com. We'll be on social media as well during the summit, so if you want to chat to us there, follow us on Twitter @GuestEducation and use the hashtags #GuestEdTech and #GuestDubai. This is just one of many on-demand videos that you can watch at any time during the summit, as well as a full program of live keynotes and panel sessions across both days. We hope that you enjoy the rest of the event. Thank you so much. Take care and bye-bye for now.